The August 12th, 2025 meeting of the Policy and Services Committee. Welcome back, everybody. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Stone.
Here.
Chair Vinker.
Here.
Councilmember Liu.
Here.
All present.
Great. Okay, our first item is public comment for matters not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers online or in the room?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, we're being efficient already. All right, moving on to our action items. Item 1 is update, discussion, and potential direction regarding state and federal legislation, executive orders, and other regulatory and funding activity. Deputy City Manager, will you be starting, or are we going to go straight to Ms. Shelby? Oh, I'm sorry. Deputy City Clerk, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Christine Pryor, Deputy City Clerk, and I'm joined by Chantal Cotton-Gaines, Deputy City Manager, and Carly Shelby, Senior Associate at Townsend Public Affairs, and also Joseph Mello, who is joining us remotely. He's in DC, so very glad that he's here on the Zoom with us tonight. So the recommendation for the committee is just to receive an update on state and federal advocacy affairs and provide any feedback on efforts that the committee would like to see. Just as a reminder for everyone, the legislative advocacy that staff undertakes is guided by the City Council approved legislative guidelines. The staff use the guidelines as a framework in consultation with the mayor and vice mayor and the city's legislative associates, Townsend Public Affairs, to respond to legislative issues that often happen too quickly to bring every individual item to a city council or committee meeting. And this allows us to be flexible and responsive to emerging issues. And after that brief introduction, I will turn the rest of the presentation over to Carly.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all in person. Love being here in Palo Alto. I'm here to provide an overview of what we're seeing transpire over the course of the 2025 legislative session on the state level. We also have a federal update that Joseph will cover. But first, I wanted to provide a snapshot of where we are in the legislative process. So the policy committee deadline was right before the legislature adjourned for summer recess on July 18th. All of those bills that follow the traditional orders of business. Keep in mind, there are always rule waivers for last minute gut amends and other things that are of the administration's priorities that can move forward at a later date. But all of those are wrapped up on July 18th. And then we broke for summer recess. They will reconvene on August 18th, which is this upcoming Monday. And then from there, we kick off the final sprint to the end of the legislative session. So we have about 3 weeks left. The fiscal committee deadline or the appropriations committee for all those second house bills is going to take place on or before August 29th. Then we have floor session, which will be September 12th, 2nd through the 12th, probably go until midnight or later on the 12th, just given that it's the first year of a 2-year session. So they're authorized to go late. And then the governor will have until October 12th to sign or veto any bills that make it to his desk. Next slide, please. So getting into some of the end of session ticket items, and these are things that need to be completed likely within the next 3 weeks, and they're pretty massive. So first off, we have budget cleanup. So this incorporates impacts of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on California's fiscal health. Keep in mind, we solved for about a $12 billion budget problem during the course of our budget process earlier this year. That has grown probably substantially, not only over the course of this fiscal year, but in subsequent fiscal years. So there may be some trigger cuts or language incorporated into, cleanup language that kind of pulls back or shifts funds away from other things. In addition to that, we'll have implementing language for future rounds of homelessness funding and new accountability requirements for programs such as the HAP program. And then we'll have implementing language for the use of Prop 4 climate bond funds. And that was the $10 billion climate bond that we passed off of the last ballot that provides funding for all things related to, parks, clean energy, sea level rise adaptation, kind of everything under that guise. So our grants team is working very actively with your team to prepare for the release of those funds. Then we have cap and trade reauthorization. So this is the market-based approach for controlling pollution by providing economic incentives for reducing emissions. Cap and trade emission allowances are deposited into the greenhouse gas reduction fund, and it generates approximately $3 to $4 billion annually. And that funds everything from affordable housing and sustainable communities programs to transit and intercity rail programs, grade separations, safe drinking water programs, and a number of other things that are very valuable to local agencies. So by reauthorizing the program, we are either doing a clean cut, a clean reauthorization, or we are reconfiguring a new structure entirely, which could bring some notable changes. So that's a very big ticket item. In addition, we have congressional redistricting. I'm sure that all of you have heard about this throughout the news cycle for the last couple weeks. This will likely be introduced via a constitutional amendment vehicle as soon as the legislature returns from its summer recess on Monday. I imagine that it will be expedited within a 72-hour timeline. We are hearing that draft maps will be released as soon as Friday of this week. So we're keeping an eye out for that and some of the impacts that it will have on those red districts, but also those longtime blue districts, because when you start to kind of cut the pie into different, angles, it could, dilute some of the districts that we have held near and dear as being blue for a long time. So following the consideration of the constitutional amendment vehicle, the governor has the authority to call a special election. And from there, we're kind of off to the races. So more to come there at the later part of this week, but that will move very, very quickly. And then finally, we have a potential housing bond. We passed a slew of our bonds last cycle, 26 billion in total. We had Prop 1, which was the mental health bond, and then we had the climate and then the school facilities bond. So there is a $10 billion potential housing bond pending before the legislature. That vehicle does not need to adhere to typical timeframes. So given some of the political dynamics of the ballot, we envision that will need to be wrapped up as soon as this session if it is to move forward. Next slide, please. So getting into some of the areas of strategic engagement from what we've experienced throughout this session, keep in mind there's still a lot more to go, despite the fact that we only have 3 weeks. But we've engaged on issues related to builder's remedy reform, local arts program protections, the housing bond, specifically to advocate for the inclusion of local housing trust fund dollars that benefit local agencies like Palo Alto that have your own local trust funds or housing trust funds, Brown Act modernization, and then local green building standards. So next slide, please. So getting into the first bill with positions, Senate Bill 457, which you guys are all very familiar with at the beginning of this session. This was introduced by Senator Becker. It had to do with the builder's remedy, and it stated that local governments have compliant housing elements the date that it is adopted by the local agency, not when it is subsequently certified by HCD or a court. And in order to have a valid builder's remedy project proposed as a developer, you needed to submit something complete. We had a support position on this and aligned ourselves with a coalition of other like-minded local agencies and other stakeholders, and it ultimately failed in the First House Policy Committee. However, we did note that there was a lot of momentum coming out of there from members noting that the builder's remedy did need some reforms. Whether that happens after these projects come to fruition, who's to say? But these projects are moving forward. We did get a lot of notoriety in the sense that folks were really motivated to kind of reform this process as we head into the next cycle. Next slide, please. Senate Bill 456 has to do with local art programs, clarifies that muralists are not subject to licensure and some of the requirements associated with that in terms of apprenticeship programs and other things that general contractors would have to go through, and allows them to, the flexibility to continue showing their artistic expression throughout local communities, especially when they're using public funds. This was a problem that arose at the beginning of this session that was brought forward by staff, and specifically some letters that may or may not have threatened the integrity of some of our programs, given that we were using funds that did not align with apprenticeship licensed artists, which isn't really a thing within most communities. But we have a support position on this. This is also co-sponsored by Cal Cities and a number of other local agencies. It's been sailing through the legislative process, and it is pending consideration in the second House Fiscal Committee. Next slide, please. Moving on to housing and land use bills, AB 650 by Assemblymember Pappen. This is a bill we have a support position on. It really improves the cadence by which local governments interact with HCD when they're going through the housing element certification process. Essentially, there's more time associated with it. You submit your element 6 months earlier, HCD has more time to review it. And then they have to provide you with a very specific and technical analysis of everything that you need to fix in order to achieve compliance. None of this back and forth all the time that kind of lingers on. And then we have issues about, when are we compliant? Is it the date of adoption? Is it the date of, certification with them? So we have a support position on this, and it is also pending consideration in the second House Fiscal Committee. Senate Bill 79 is a very popular bill this session. This adopts new zoning standards for residential and mixed-use housing within 1/2 mile of a transit-oriented development stop. It makes an allowable use. So there are 3 tiers based on transit service and frequency. There are a couple within Palo Alto. There have been a number of amendments to this bill. It's gone through so many iterations, and we envision that there will be more. But there are now affordability requirements, and now there is a path for alternative compliance. So that can be via housing element updates that your team completes either the 6th or 7th cycle. And then local agencies are authorized to adopt transit-oriented development incentive ordinances, zoning overlays. But again, all of these alternative pathways need to be reviewed by HCD and must maintain, aggregate density and other requirements associated with not downzoning. There will likely be subsequent amendments to address some of the concerns by local communities surrounding very high fire severity zones and some of the egress and routes. So that may be coming soon, but we understand that the author is still very much engaged in stakeholder conversations with this. Moving on to Assembly Bill 306, and ultimately this was wrapped into Budget Trailer Bill 130, AB 130. But this is the local building standards moratorium bill. And essentially prior to the enaction of this bill, local governments could make changes to the California Building Standards Commission standards for building standards on residential units by adopting more stringent standards, so long as you made findings that the changes were necessary to mitigate any local climate or geological issues. Now this prohibits cities from making changes or modifications to these building standards affecting residential units between October 1st of this year until June 1st of 2031. And there are specific caveats to this, and that is if these standards are equivalent to modifications that were in place as of September 30th of this year. They're necessary to protect health and safety or implement home hardening procedures. The amendment aligns with a general plan to implement either mixed fuel residential construction or incentivize all electric construction, and these had to be in place previously, or the changes are related to administrative practices or cost reductions. So we had an oppose unless amended position on this bill. Ultimately, it was incorporated into Budget Trailer Bill AB 130 and was, shot through that process within a 72-hour timeframe. So we're very engaged on that, and we're ultimately disappointed to see it, kind of looped into the budget process and pulled out of the policy process. Next slide, please. Moving on to the housing bonds. So as I said before, there are 2 housing bond vehicles. Both constitute $10 billion in state accessible housing bond funds to be placed on an upcoming ballot, which is indeterminate at this point, to fund the production of affordable housing and supportive housing throughout the state. So currently, both bill vehicles include programs like the multifamily housing program or MHP program, the portfolio reinvestment program, or in the CalHO program, among others. So there still needs to be major amendments to the Senate bill vehicle, which still has not had its first policy committee hearing. So there is a long road ahead if we do want to finalize a housing bond at the end of this year. We also understand that in terms of some of the ballot dynamics that are playing out, the most viable ballot for us to put something like this on is going to be the June one, not November. Apparently, building trades and other stakeholders are preparing another statewide bond or ballot initiative. We don't quite know yet that they are really slating for the November ballot. So a lot of folks have been asked to kind of clear the decks and move this onto a sooner ballot. So in order to have a compelling campaign by that time, something like this would need to pass by September 13th. And I know that we still are missing amendments and policy committee deadlines, but they can absolutely waive rule waivers and do everything under the sun to expedite this through the process. It's just a matter of if the legislature is really going to prioritize this. We have a support if amended position to advocate for the inclusion of local housing trust fund dollars. The local housing trust fund was established under the last statewide housing bond, and it included $300 million for local housing trust statewide. And these are really the only dollars that local agencies, including local housing trusts, can directly apply for. And it's, revolving loan stuff. It's funds, affordable housing, supportive housing, homelessness programs. And it's really kind of those last dollars in that local governments can direct to projects within their communities that they want to see fund some of their priorities. So really want this program to come back. We have a coalition letter that we're working on. The city of Palo Alto has prepared its own letter in support of this, but we're really working with members to see if A, we can advocate for this bond to move forward, if at all, and then B, to include at least $500 million within the local housing trust fund program. Next slide, and then we'll just move to the next one, actually. Okay, so notable legislation, as I've mentioned before, we had two housing and land use trailer bills that moved through, and they were a big melting pot of policy bills that were thrown into the budget process and expedited. So Assembly Bill 130, as I discussed earlier, which had the local building standards moratorium, that included that. It also included a VMT mitigation bank, which allows developers to satisfy transportation CEQA mitigation requirements through this new transit-oriented development implementation program that's administered by HCD. Essentially, developers can contribute to a state-managed fund in lieu of on-site mitigation. There is Permit Streamlining Act modifications and expansion. There is a new CEQA infill housing exemption for qualifying projects that are 20 acres or less. And then there's additional flexibility related to programs such as the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program. Senate Bill 131 has another mess of housing policy bills and funding mechanisms. So there's a new CEQA near miss provision, which essentially says that if you satisfy all but one of CEQA requirements, instead of going through mitigation practices for all of them and missing it altogether, you can just focus on those one or two criteria that you are not satisfying. There are also CEQA exemptions for a number of developments, and this includes, but is not limited to, farm worker housing, daycares, healthcare clinics, manufacturing facilities, wildfire mitigation, so fuel mod projects, which is pretty major so long as you satisfy certain criteria, and then some of the Prop 4 climate bond uses. So if you are seeking to utilize Prop 4 funds for the development or acquisition of any kind of land associated with the development of a new park project, you have a full CEQA exemption. And then in addition to that, you have high-speed rail CEQA exemptions. In addition to that, we have the language contained for the HAP Round 7 program. Notably, there's only 500 million appropriated out to fiscal year 26-27. Typically, that's funded at about $1 billion per year each fiscal year. So we skipped a year and we funded it at half of what we usually do. And then now there's urban infill mapping as well. And we provided a memo that kind of details all of these provisions, and happy to walk through them all. There's a lot here. So if there's any questions I can't answer, we can circle back. Okay, moving on. And I'll just breeze through these quickly and we can answer more questions. But Senate Bill 707, this is the Brown Act Modernization Act. This makes numerous changes to the Brown Act, including new public access and participation requirements, new translation requirements, new two-way audiovisual requirements. We've been working with your staff pretty diligently on this and have been working with the author staff. So the great news is that City of Palo Alto, you guys are incredibly sophisticated in your Brown Act compliance mechanisms and, having everything be online. So this is something that we're actively working with the author's office on. Yeah, and then moving on to the next slide, Senate Bill 63 by Senator Wiener. This is the San Francisco Bay Area local revenue measure to fund transportation funding. I've sent over an overview of the expenditure plan that is in draft form now. Now we officially have San Mateo County on board. So all 5 counties are in agreement here, but it's essentially a 0.5-cent sales tax to be levied on Alameda, Contra Costa, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. And then the city and county of San Francisco would adopt a 1-cent increase to be in effect for a 14-year time span. And then finally, I'm going to turn it over to Joseph for some federal updates.
Thank you, Carly. Vice Mayor, council members, good to be with you this evening to provide a federal update out of Washington, D.C. And Congress is currently out of session and will return in early September, but there is still quite a bit to highlight. So starting on this first slide, wanted to briefly touch on the new DOJ sanctuary city list. You may have seen that DOJ published an updated list of sanctuary jurisdictions following a recent executive order. Included on this list is the entire state of California. DOJ says these jurisdictions materially impede federal immigration enforcement and indicated they may pursue litigation or attach consequences through federal programs that would most likely look or come in the form of terminating contracts on grant programs. What else, though, does this mean practically? We've seen past attempts to condition federal funds on immigration compliance. A lot of them were narrowed or blocked in court, but this list can still trigger a program-by-program scrutiny and compliance questions, additional questions in future grants. So we're expecting, more certifications and assurances in future notice of funding opportunities or award conditions. We may also see increases in records requests or inquiries to confirm compliance. So more to come there. Also wanted to highlight 2026 surface transportation reauthorization. I've been working with your staff pretty closely on a few efforts related to this, but most recently, TPA is organizing a joint advocacy letter on behalf of our city clients. This will be sent to DOT in about a week and a half by their August 20th deadline. The department has requested comment and feedback regarding surface transportation reauthorization, and the letter we are working on urges the department to strengthen local control over surface transportation block grant funding by advocating for a more direct role for metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs in administering those funds. So for some background, surface transportation reauthorization happens once every 5 years. And this process ultimately shapes how hundreds of billions of dollars in transportation funding is distributed. So it's really a great opportunity for cities to influence how that funding will ultimately flow. And the motivation behind this letter and this focus on local control and the approach we're taking with this letter is really due to the fact that there's growing momentum in Congress right now to reduce reliance on competitive grant programs in favor for formula-based distributions. So We've kind of seen this trend historically before. And we think, MPOs are very well equipped and responsive to local needs. They're already responsible for regional transportation planning and are required by federal law to develop transportation improvement programs. So the goal really is to focus on more local control and less state bottleneck, and an added benefit that many MPO managed programs are typically a little less restrictive and easier to tap into than some federal programs. So we've held conversations with MTC and some other MPOs who fully support this idea. And we have about 10 or so cities, 10 or so cities currently signed on to the letter, and would love to add Palo Alto to that list. So working with your staff on this, and happy to answer any questions if you've had time to review that letter. Wanted to also flag the recent EPA cancellation for Solar for All program. This happened on August 7th. EPA announced it is terminating the roughly $7 billion Solar for All grant program. This was part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And the administration is citing loss of statutory authority after the enactment of the One Big Beautiful Bill. California's allocation was roughly $250 million to expand mostly low-income rooftop community solar. And there's been quite a bit of reporting that California had spent very little of this money to date, as they were still working out on the program details. But we expect, some lawsuits to flow from this as well. And as I mentioned, California's design for the program was still kind of in the planning phase. But any folks who are hoping to tap into this are likely going to face some delays or complete cancellation. In a similar vein, I wanted to also highlight, it's not explicitly mentioned on this slide, but another recent executive order this month called the Improving Oversight of Federal Grant Making. So this was issued by President Trump on August 7th. And this order was aimed at tightening control over federal discretionary grants. The biggest part of it is mandating the appointment of political senior appointees in each agency to review funding opportunities and awards, and to ensure alignment with what the administration prioritizes and views as in the national interest. It really emphasized strict oversight and included termination for convenience clauses, also tightening restrictions on indirect cost recovery, and also a major focus on more plain language grant materials. They're hoping to make future grant opportunities more accessible. And lastly, it pauses new discretionary funding opportunities until revised and reviewed processes are in place. So this is really going to be a significant increase in grant administration. The ability of agencies to terminate grants for convenience will likely introduce a lot of uncertainty, especially for long-term projects. Grants moving forward could be, subject to additional political scrutiny or mid-project termination. So, we expect additional internal compliance and documentation needs, but there's still a lot to play out here. The one kind of good part of this is they're seeking to simplify and make the grant process more accessible. So that would likely be a welcome change, but taken as a whole, it's potentially going to be quite detrimental to the future of some grants. And lastly, on this slide, wanted to touch on the appropriations process. Although we're in recess currently, the Senate has passed three of their 12 FY26 bills. The House has passed 2 so far. And as we've seen in previous years, the Senate version is less drastic in the cuts it is looking to make. The House imposes cuts much deeper and more in line with the president's budget request. But we anticipate that any final appropriations packages will generally align with the Senate version and keep funding more or less steady, as we've seen in previous years. Next slide, please. And part of the appropriations process is community project funding. Earlier this year, we submitted a community project funding request to Congressman Liccardo's office for consideration. He selected it and advanced it for consideration to the Appropriations Committee, where it was approved at a level of $850,000 for funding to address operational deficiencies at Fire Station 4. So this is currently in the package. We anticipate this will be the final number when the bill is signed into law, as long as we don't see a situation unfold like last fiscal year of a continuing resolution. At this point, we think there will be at least a short-term continuing resolution, as Congress generally isn't able to wrap up appropriations in time by the end of September. But most signs point to them getting a deal done, hopefully around the December timeline. Next slide, please. And lastly, I wanted to touch briefly on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. As Carly mentioned, there's a lot of impact that will be flowing down to the state level from this legislation. TPA sent around a comprehensive analysis of this legislation. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I would recommend reading through the parts that are of interest, because there is a lot in this bill. But since the beginning of the second Trump administration in the budget reconciliation process, TPA has been very closely engaged with the House Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, obviously our congressional delegation, congressional leadership to advocate on a few key issues. It's a massive bill, and so we focused really on three key areas. The first being municipal bonds. Some of the original proposals coming out of House Ways and Means targeted the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. So this would have been quite a detrimental provision and was a constant point of discussion in our meetings. Ultimately, this provision did not make its way into the final draft of the bill, so we were very pleased to see that. On SNAP, we were successful in advocating for a delay in the implementation of the new SNAP cost sharing requirements, securing a postponement until 2027. So, this is a small win, but was really designed ultimately to allow for additional time for preparation, and was grounded in the practical realities of the current Congress. And then also the clean energy tax credits. We worked with several committees on this issue, and while the credits were not fully saved, the final version of the bill provided for more accommodating timelines than initially proposed, and avoided a full-scale repeal of many of these tax credits. But I wanted to highlight, importantly, the spending reductions from this bill generally did not come from cuts to services themselves, but rather via cost shifting the administration and benefits of the programs onto the states. So, as well as introducing new work requirements, eligibility checks more frequently, things like that. So, how the state of California responds to these changes remains to be seen. There's estimated between a $20 and $40 billion loss in funding over the next 10-year budget window. And this is an issue that my colleague Carly will likely be tackling for some time. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Carly. Thanks.
That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Pryor, Ms. Shelby, and Mr. Mello, for whom it is 9:35 and the sun is set. So we appreciate you joining us from DC. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No, we do not.
Okay, great. Well, there's certainly a lot to digest in this year, which is a little bit of an unusual year in a variety of ways. So let's see if we have any questions or comments from my colleagues. Councilmember Liu.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions about some of the state bills. And maybe I'd start with AB 306. There was a description of the carve-outs for how green building codes or building codes that otherwise really incentivize all electric construction would work. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the language. I was a little bit confused on equivalent to modifications that were effective as of September 20th and aligns with the general plan to incentivize all electric construction. like maybe the key words are, how do we define modifications, and also what does incentivize all electric construction mean?
Yeah, these are great questions, Councilmember. And I just want to add too that these are questions that a number of local agencies are really starting to perk up about as we're approaching some of these deadlines. Essentially, as we, head into some of these compliance deadlines, all of these existing standards that are embedded within your guys's local building standards codes that were in effect, as of, or, on before those dates, should remain stable so long as they adhere to either the mixed fuel use or, incentivizing all electric construction, which I know that you guys have existing reach codes that do that. So it's just a moratorium on adopting new ones, but those ones should remain in place.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to add, so there is considerable unknowns about exactly what this language means and how the state agencies will interpret and apply it. So there was a lot of discussion amongst local agencies, and the utilities and sustainability groups have been looking at this very closely. We think that we, in terms of the changes that the staff is interested in making in the near term, we think we have very good arguments that we are able to move forward under the language of the statute with that will fall under an exception. But in an abundance of caution, the staff is going to accelerate some of the changes, and they will come to council more quickly so that we hope that we will also qualify for a second reason why we can move forward with those, which is getting them in place by this deadline that's there in the statute. It's
Okay.
not well drafted, and it
Mhm.
was drafted and adopted in a hurry. So we're working with the language to understand it.
Okay.
And I'll just jump in here because I actually had meant to comment on that before I turned it over. Yeah, this is something, as you know, we watched every step of the way as it jumped from 306 to the budget trailer bill. And yes, I think if you're from the language that you're focusing on, it's more about the incentivize all electric construction than necessarily the mixed fuel. And that would be great if we fell into that exception, but amongst electeds and advocates, so not even just city staff, there's a lot of differing opinions out there about whether or not we fall into that exception. I personally believe the city does, but I don't get to, I'm not the ultimate decider on that. So there was a lot of interest, in other cities are taking actions to move before September 30. And so that's partly why I also really pushed staff to think hard about it. And so the better course is what Molly described. Sorry, City Attorney Stump. And so that will be coming, I believe, first to climate and sustainability, and then to council with the hope that we can get that all done by September 30, just to kind of have a belt and suspenders approach. But it is interesting because there is not consensus out there about it, I think at any level. And I even spoke to Senator Becker about it, who said, if you want us to ask my staff to try to get an opinion. And I think the better approach is the one that we're following at the moment.
Right. Okay. So September 20th is the deadline.
I think that's a typo, isn't it 30?
Okay, it is 30. Okay, great. I'm glad that we can try to get some things on the books. And I'm optimistic that if we say that our previous code was equivalent to incentivizing all electric construction, that very few people will actually try to challenge us on that. I suppose their mechanism would then be to try to sue us and say that we are misinterpreting the state requirements for incentivizing all electric construction, and then try to dispute the language of our code and what the state requirement is, which seems really untractable and untenable for anyone to reasonably want to do for almost all developments. Is that right?
I believe there's a step before that where the state agency will have some input into accepting a newly passed amendment or not. But yes, what you've described is another way in which a challenge could be brought.
Okay, then I'm optimistic at least about that way, that a challenge could be brought wouldn't actually happen in practice. So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just, since we're a little more informal on the committee, just on that note, there is some buzz out there about cleanup language because this went so quickly into the housing trailer bill and whether or not that would get through. The latest buzz I've heard is that maybe, but not this year. And so I don't know if, Ms. Shelby, you have something different on that you are hearing.
Yeah, so Vice Mayor, we understand that there will be some form of cleanup language for both AB 130 and SB 131. However, I don't know if it's particularly pertaining to the local building standards moratorium. As Ms. Stump said, the onus is really on the California Building Standards Commission to either accept or reject any subsequent amendment. So I would imagine that given they are really the implementing force for this, compliance, that there may be some kind of rulemaking process in terms of getting everyone on the same page before this goes into effect. So if and when a regulatory process commences, we'll be sure to engage.
The conversations I've heard were actually about legislation and we're with some legislators. So I'm sorry, and it was specific to the climate building code. So I'm optimistic.
Fingers crossed.
Cool. And one last question. So on SB 79, what is Townsend, what is actionable for Townsend, or what is Townsend looking into doing right now? Obviously, there have been a lot of amendments. There are amendments that I'd personally be interested in. I'm not sure how productive it is to try to just straight oppose it. So I'm curious what your take is and what your plan is.
Yeah, I mean, I want to note that, the senator's office has really been incredible in working with local stakeholders on a number of issues. And he's been a great partner as we kind of navigate the complexities of this policy and all of the amendments. I think there's been like close to 10 iterations of them over the course of this bill. But in terms of things that, we've been really working on, really have to deal with some of these alternative compliance plans and requiring that any TOD, zoning changes occur within the housing element compliance process. So there's not two different timelines occurring. And that's something that was ultimately achieved through the local government committee. And then as we look forward, I think that there are concerns about some of the, like I said, the very high fire severity zones and kind of upzoning and where these transit stops are and how they kind of overlay into some of these very sensitive areas. So some of the egress route requirements and some of the historic designation carve outs. So historic buildings, which he did previously through other bills like SB 9 and SB 35. So those are still very much in progress, aside from the TOD alternative planning process, but we look forward to continuing to work with his office.
Thank you. I think as I was reading the amendments, it seemed like the local TOD option really actually quite minimized the impact to Palo Alto, with maybe the exception of Old Palo Alto on the other side of Cal Ave, where under local TOD, we could reduce the sort of transit minimum density there to 50% of what would ordinarily be allowed under SB 79. So there could be 3-story buildings in Old Palo Alto or 4-story multifamily buildings immediately adjacent to the Caltrain station on the other side of Alma. I don't really think that 3 stories is much of a problem, or maybe there's some refinement we could ask to bring that 50% number to something that might be a little bit more accommodating the community, so we could have that extra flexibility in the local TOD plan. And I think under the current plan, the location of the actual transit stop is considered the full parcel, which has always been a problem in Palo Alto because our transit stops are technically like a half-mile long parcel, even though the boarding platform is much smaller. And I suppose that's something we could fix just by changing parcels, but might be something nice to fix generally for all of the affected cities. So those are a couple of comments that came to mind as I was reviewing the SB 79 amendments.
Staff have any comments on the comments?
I think as much feedback as we can glean from this is very helpful as we continue these conversations. So looking forward to following up with you on some of your comments.
Well, just clarification from staff. I mean, comments of one council member on policy and services is not, isn't changing how we might advocate for this particular position.
Correct. We would align it with our position we've taken so far, which is sort of representing what we know is in the legislative guidelines, not necessarily some of the nuances related to the density and the housing, just because that would be a stretch further without getting the full council direction on it.
Okay, agreed. Thanks.
Just on this topic before we move on, Councilmember Liu was talking about the Caltrain station. I haven't looked at this closely, but some of the major bus routes that go down Oregon, are those included?
Are you referring to Oregon or El Camino?
Oregon. So are there none? I thought there used to be major, like Cross Bay, no?
No, I think the DB9 still stops in a few places along Page Mill in Oregon.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure that we're done when we deal with the Caltrain. And maybe I don't know,
Okay.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, my understanding was that at least the buses on El Camino would not qualify as any tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 transit. I thought there was something about the buses needing, for at least one of those tiers, needing dedicated bus lanes or something that we definitely would not qualify for.
Okay, well, we can take this offline. I just wanted to,
Those are great questions and we'll follow up, find the information.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stone, do you have anything on any of these?
Just one more question, more out of curiosity. You answered a couple of my others. As far as the congressional redistricting and the timeline there, I know the governor has the power to call a special election. As far as the timeline on that goes, I mean, is there a certain amount of days between being able to call that election and when that election would happen? And would it have to fall like in the November or June kind of general election timeline, or could that happen anytime? Or would that just not be politically or economically viable because of how expensive those elections are? Do you have any insight on that? Because I think that's just going to be, even though I support it, I think we are about to enter a very chaotic time politically on this massive scramble. And so if you could give a little insight on that.
Yeah, great question, council member. So in terms of the timing associated with this, we understand that it's likely that the governor would be targeting November 4th as the special election time frame. Typically, and I will have to look into some of the Secretary of State guidelines, but in terms of like bills that pass out of the legislature and onto the ballot, they need at least about 90 days to notify the county registrars, just for them to be able to have the bandwidth to print and distribute the ballots accordingly. The financing for all of that is unclear. It may be that they pass a complementing budget trailer measure that includes some kind of upfront funding for some of the counties to implement special election costs. But I do want to just flag that while this process is moving forward, as of now, the governor has made calls to Governor Abbott in Texas and Donald Trump to stand down so that we kind of don't kick off this gerrymandering arms race, as they're all saying. And there will be trigger provisions embedded within this language that says, if Texas does this by X date, then we move forward. If they stand down by X date, then it all kind of evaporates. So more to come. But we're not abolishing the commission is what I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Wow, I was wondering how one could get it done that quickly. It's still, when you, 90 days, like, okay. Thank you for that. Will be fascinating. I'm turning past all the questions that have been answered so far. Turn past that one. Oh, I was just curious, so with the budget bills and SB 131 and the CEQA exemptions that have changed. The ones that are still there, you know, farm worker housing, daycares, clinics, manufacturing facilities, that seems broad, and I was surprised to see it in the list. Is there any color narrowing around there, or what's the thinking there?
Yes, great question. I can get the specifics. I was just poring over the statute and it's escaping me at the moment, but there are very specified circumstances by which a CEQA exemption would apply.
Yeah, I just, okay. So moving on for the moment to the federal report, I did want to mention, Mr. Mello talked about that top left box, the new DOJ sanctuary city list. I'm wondering if for the public's benefit, we should just give an update on the lawsuit that the council had voted to join. Do you want to just give a status update, City Attorney?
Sure. So the court did accept the batch of, I believe, 33 new plaintiffs who wanted to join that lawsuit, including our city. And there is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair Binker, we are still waiting on the second piece, which is a motion to have the injunction expanded to include the additional plaintiffs, including our city.
Yeah, that's, from what I understand, that's the case, but I wanted to make sure and triangulate and let Townsend know that we have actually joined that lawsuit. And so sort of keeping an eye on that will be relevant to that particular issue. I don't want to talk about the EPA cancellation of the solar program. I'm just going to move right past that. So this executive order that Mr. Mello brought up, improving oversight related to grants, with politicals being appointed to review them in the various agencies and pausing discretionary grants. Are those grants to both private and public recipients?
Yes, it would apply to all grantees.
Okay.
But each agency still has to kind of absorb this EO and issue additional guidance.
Okay. No, thank you. It's just that as we, as a city, try to get a handle on the impact of EOs like this, we have to think about the impact to us, to other governmental agencies up the chain that we rely on, but also to the private sector, and particularly our neighbor, the large educational institution to our west, which has already been hit with funding loss in a variety of areas and has laid off employees. And I'm wondering if some of these additional grants might impact them, and a lot of the small and large businesses that are within our borders. So it seems like this could potentially a fairly far-reaching EO. Does that, am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think one of the points, the tighter restrictions on indirect cost recovery will probably impact research institutions probably the heaviest. But you're right in thinking about this holistically, not just at the city level, because it will impact grantees beyond government entities.
Yeah, so if it impacts government entities, impacts, educational and research institutions, I don't know, there are oftentimes a lot of private sector partners that get research grants as well. So this is not great news, but thank you. And then you mentioned the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the letter that related to that surface transportation reauthorization. I don't know that I'm aware of it. Think it sounds like a good thing to be aware of. Could you maybe staff just tell us where that is in process?
Yes, we're reviewing it with department staff, and once we have a draft ready for you, the mayor and vice mayor to look at, we'll send it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Because obviously this is important in every 5 years and all of that. We have sent a lot of letters this year, but primarily at the state level. So I think it's not really a concern from that perspective, but I wasn't anticipating a lot more letters this year. But this seems like a very good exception. And then finally, on the last substantive slide where it talks about clean energy and talks about credits for solar and wind subject to new construction start and project placement. Is that code for not here? What does project placement mean?
Yeah, so on the clean energy tax front portion, there's a number of different ones. Home solar and energy, upgrade credits for residents. Those end at the end of this calendar year. There's the EV tax credits. Those end September 30th of this year. And then there's grid scale and utility projects that must now meet some stricter deadlines, which those have to be in construction or in service by 2027. So those are kind of the three main buckets. And sorry, what was the exact phrase you were asking
I
about?
was just curious about project placement, whether that meant region or if it meant, type of site or what project placement meant.
I think that may be referring to project placed in service, just worded oddly. But that would be what I think that's referring to there.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot more to come as our state legislature reconvenes next week, right? And some pretty big stuff happening in cap and trade, and I don't think we need here necessarily to talk about in any detail about the Western states, Western energy markets bill, but what happens with that will have a significant effect on our city, given that we own our own electric utility. So we'll be watching that closely, and folks at NCPA are paying a lot of attention to that. Senator Becker's been speaking out about that. So I think hopefully we can get some more reports on that. Actually, as it unfolds, that would be great. Okay, I don't think, I'm just going over my notes here. I don't think I have any more questions, but I certainly appreciate you being here, Ms. Shelby, and Mr. Mello staying up to talk with us, brief us. It's kind of a twisting and turning ride this year, so we will stay tuned for the finale. All right, thank you so much. I guess I should ask you how many more questions. It didn't look like you did. No? Okay, all right.
And just another note, if there are any other bills that come up to your awareness space that we didn't have on the list or that you do have concerns about, please send those to myself as well as Ms. Pryor, and we can make sure that Townsend does look into those. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we will move on to item 2, which is Office of the City Auditor presentation of the purchasing card audit report. And whom do we have today to present that?
Ms. Murdoch is online and we have staff present if there are questions after.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Murdoch.
Good evening, committee members. Kate Murdoch, City Auditor. The Auditor's Office is pleased to present the results of the purchasing card audit. This audit was included as part of the FY 2025 annual audit plan, and Nick Martinez served as the lead on this project and will be giving our presentation. So I'll hand it over to Nick.
Nick, if you're speaking, we're unable to hear you. You might be muted.
Yeah. Nick, can you hear us? Nick, welcome. If you'd like to go ahead with your presentation, please do.
Hello, sorry about that. You guys were cutting in. I apologize. Very nice to meet you. Good evening. My name is Nick Martinez. I'm a senior auditor with Baker Tilly, and I'll be presenting the results of the purchasing card program audit. Okay. The primary objectives of this audit were to determine if P cards are being used appropriately in compliance with the city's policies as well as relevant laws and regulations, and to evaluate the P card program's administration to ensure there are adequate internal controls in place to protect the city from fraud, waste, and abuse. Next slide, please. Thank you. To give you some background, the city's P card program is used by 42 departments and had approximately 254 active cardholders as of January 2025. As you can see on the slide, cards can be used to make purchases of up to $10,000 value, and cardholders have a monthly card limit of $15,000. Overall, this program serves to simplify the purchasing process and reduce administrative costs. Next slide, please. So here's our first finding relating to policy adherence and training. Overall, we found the city's P card program has a strong internal controls, and we found that users were largely compliant with procurement policies, but there is some room for improvement. We would like to emphasize that all of the transactions that we reviewed were officially city use, and there was no evidence of personal use, which is excellent. We did find that some purchases lacked proper documentation. And additionally, due to some limitations in the current system, we couldn't really verify the timeliness of approval for purchases. Lastly, the city currently lacks a formal ongoing training program for P card users, though staff are in the process of reestablishing one. Next slide, please. Okay, so based on these findings, we have a few recommendations. We recommend that the city continue its efforts to establish and implement a formal ongoing P card training program for both cardholders and approvers, focusing specifically on the documentation requirements. We also suggest collaborating with the city's P card system vendor to explore some system enhancements, such as adding time-stamping functionality for approval actions and automating some non-compliance notifications to users. The city should also consider the benefits of implementing clearly defined consequences for non-adherence. But of course, you'll need to do this weighing them against the necessary time and resources that it would take to apply such a program. Next slide, please. Our next finding pertains to oversight and administrative gaps. We discovered that some oversight and administrative functions of the P card program aren't consistently completed and documented. We believe that adopting more efficient review processes could lead to some significant staff time savings. The post-audit process is not always completed due to staff shortages, and the process itself can be very time-consuming. The manual system used for tracking P card misuse is also inconsistent and incomplete. That makes it difficult for the enforcement of the policy and to identify those trends when they're occurring. Lastly, the process for increasing P card limits lacks formal documentation for exceptions, and some approvals were missing as part of our review. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of the recommendations for that finding, we have a few. Implementing a new post-audit process that uses a statistically valid random sampling methodology would help to ensure making it a little bit more efficient and accurate, provide some accurate transaction reviews. Creating a system to consistently and comprehensively track all instances of P-card misuse, including the date, the type of infraction, and the resolution. And lastly, to formalize and standardize that P-card limit exception process. This can be done by revising the request form to include fields for documenting the rationale and approval for all types of exceptions. Next slide, please. During our audit, we made some additional observations that could lead to some significant operational efficiencies. We believe that the city could increase operational efficiencies and save staff time by increasing the P-card spending limits. The current limits haven't been increased since 2016, and the federal micro purchase threshold is expected to increase to 15,000 in October of 2025. Staff estimated that each purchase order requires about 10 hours of staff time to process from start to finish, so increasing the limit here could certainly provide some relief there. Based on that estimate, our analysis suggests that if P-card limit had been raised to 15,000, it could have diverted approximately 94 purchase orders to P-cards for FY24, and this would have saved staff about 940 hours of time. Next slide, please. Oh, great. Thank you for your time and attention. We appreciate it. We are now open to any questions you may have for our report.
All right, well, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public, first, is there a staff response that you'd like to, any comments?
We're present to answer questions as they come up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to give you a chance. Do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
All right, thank you. All right, colleagues, questions? I'm getting a no. Councilmember Liu.
Thank you. So from reading the report, the only kinds of violations that were found were cost splitting. Is that right? Or like policy issues? The only kind of, can you just
Correct.
address, is cost splitting the only issue identified?
So I think we identified a few other minor issues, but that is correct. We did not find any instances of people misusing cards for personal use or violating policy in terms of using cards in a way that they shouldn't be used. So the cost splitting is something that is not, is not advised, and the city prohibits that. So those instances were very few, but they, are often caught by the post-audit review process that ASD does it, on a monthly basis. So.
Okay. So can you confirm exactly what cost splitting is? Is that dividing a $20,000 purchase into two $10,000 purchases, or is it, can you elaborate, please?
Correct. So it would be if there were, say, a $13,000 purchase and it got split either on 2 different days and the same card user, split it on the 2 different days in order to cover the cost, or if 2 employees kind of work together to put half of the expenses on one card and half the expenses on another card.
Got it. So they would do that so they wouldn't have to go through the several-hour ordeal of trying to submit a form. Okay. And there weren't any cases of cost splitting identified to stay below the $1,000 limit that would trigger review, were there? Or I'm curious if you looked at that as well, or if you considered that cost splitting.
I don't believe that we identified any instances like that, but I'll see if Nick recalls. I don't think we saw any cost splitting at that threshold level.
Correct.
Okay. Right. I think cost splitting above 10,000 is extremely understandable because they're going to be audited anyways. And it would be foolish to try to make 2 multi-$1,000 transactions and I don't know, otherwise transact improperly. But if you're trying to do like 10 $100 transactions to evade, that seems qualitatively just much worse. And I'm glad that we did not see that.
Yes, and the city's current practice reviews suspicious looking transactions. So certainly if there were repeat transactions within the same vendor, dollar amounts evenly divided, transactions that were occurring on the same day from the same card holder within the same team, all of that is included in ASD's review.
Okay, great. So I think raising the threshold generally makes sense to me. There was a number that I want to confirm before like really being firm in that decision. So there was a metric of these on staff report page 19, where there was an analysis of the most recent month of audits, where there were 203 purchases of 1,310 reviewed. And then it just kind of goes on. And then it says that of the 61, 10 transactions were identified as cost splitting violations. I don't, it's not clear to me from reading this, like what the 61 denominator actually is. If you could pull that number up in the
Ryan.
report. You could do a control F for the number, 203.
Let me, I'm having some. Do you have it up, Nick?
Trying to get to it 1 second.
It's actually on staff report page 20, correct, Councilmember Lou?
Oh, on mine it says staff report, page 18.
Oh, there's another reference on page 20.
Oh, okay. Oops.
And maybe I'm not tracking. So this was not in the P card audit itself?
No, it wasn't the P card audit. It was, it reads the OCA also performed a deeper analysis of the most recent month. And then it says the post-audit review documentation indicated that of 61 transactions, approximately 30 required additional follow-up. And it's not really clear where those 61 transactions came from. What?
I see it at the bottom of page 15.
Oh, right. Okay, on yours it's packet page 20. Okay, yeah, that's right. I don't know why this printed version says packet page 18. Okay.
It may have changed with late packet reports potentially.
Okay.
I have found the section. So
okay, so it said that there were 203 reviewed.
correct.
And then it says of the 203, 164 exceeded 1,000. And then it said that 61 transactions, 30 were reviewed for additional, 30 required additional follow-up. So like, what does that 61 transactions mean?
So I think 61 of the 203 transactions were followed up on.
Oh, okay. So you audited 61 of 203, and of those 10 were cost splitting.
Well, and I just want to be clear. So this was actually accounts payables review. So this was ASD did this review. And so when we were reviewing their post-audit review process, these were the results of their review process. So the Administrative Services Department is the one who identified, they followed up on 61 of those 203 transactions that they had pulled the sample, and found that approximately 30 reviewed required additional follow-up with cardholders. And then 10 transactions were identified by them as being cost splitting violations.
And we have Assistant Director David Ramberg here who can speak to that as well.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. David Ramberg with the Administrative Services Department. So we do a monthly review of P-card transactions. We currently look at any transaction over 1,000, as well as IT type transactions for IT services and things like that, and equipment. We per this audit, we're shifting to a new process where we'll do a random sampling of transactions. But what this is referring to is when we identify cost splitting violations, we track those violations in a worksheet. We're adding some components to that worksheet, also one of the recommendations in the audit, and we follow up on those. What that means is we reach out to the user and we remind them of the rules. And in most cases, that's clears up the issue. On occasion, we have repeat offenders, so-called offenders, and we will repeat that process. We are also looking to enhance our consequence sort of process, where we would add a layer of potentially canceling someone's card for a period of time, or ultimately revoking somebody's card if it becomes that extreme. We haven't really had those instances recently.
Thank you. That seems very reasonable. I guess I'm just confused at the end of the day whether it's 10 out of 61, so 16% of transactions, at least those over 1,000, are cost splitting, or whether it's actually 1%. You know, there's quite a wide range, and it's not obvious from this analysis whether it's 1 or 16.
Got it. So I think in the way this is written, I would say that that's 1% of total transactions for that time period. And there were actually, I'm just learning here from staff as well, there was about 1,300 charges in that month. So what we pulled, yeah, I would say that 1% is accurate in this case.
Well, 1%, I don't want to belabor this point, it's not that important, but 1% of the
Total transactions, time
but you
period.
only looked at 61 transactions. So if it's 10 out of 61, then it's actually 16%, at least depending on what those 61 actually represent, which is not obvious at all. We identified 1% out of 1,300, but we don't know what the actual percentage is.
And I think that's actually a very good catch that you made. I think probably would have been more accurate for us to have calculated that 10 transactions out of the 203 sampled. And that's a rate of about 4.9%.
Yeah, but it's not even clear to me why it's 10 out of 203 instead of 10 out of 61, or the numbers I think really are not clear, and the lead is kind of buried because these are the, I guess, only policy violations that we found, and we don't really know how common they are and what we could do about them, whether it's increasing thresholds or anything else. So
I would just add that cost splitting is an unusual instance in a month. This month that what happened to be polled, we had 10. That is a pretty high month for cost splitting. Overall, it's an unusual instance. And to your point, if we were to raise the threshold, which is one of the observations in the audit, that would give more bandwidth for making purchases. And that would probably bring down instances of cost splitting. But that's a whole nother conversation.
And if I can add related to that, the city auditor's office is also looking separately at another audit related to the spending authorities. And so there's an opportunity, if this is an interest of thinking of raising the limit, that can be part of that broader audit instead of being a one-off thing on its own. So just wanted to share that with the committee today, that is work that the auditor's office is doing, and this could be connected if it made sense to do so.
Okay. I think I'm still somewhat confused on what we should take away from this, and in terms of what the actual rate of cost splitting is, or whether cost splitting is something that is quote unquote bad, or something that we just want to enable sort of by increasing the threshold so people don't have to cost split. I'll wrap up here. I think there's not a clear takeaway, for me at least, from at least this part of the analysis.
All right, thank you. I mean, to me, there's cost splitting something we don't want to see done, and whether it's, quote, some sort of qualitatively good or bad depends. I mean, there's, not following the rules is not good, but if we were to, I think we can't answer the other question until we know what the appropriate number might be today. So I don't think we can say it's good or bad qualitatively that way. But I just wanted to say that, I mean, overall, I feel pretty good about this audit. We didn't find people abusing their credit cards and spending on personal stuff or, fraud and that kind of thing that we read so much about. So, kudos to our staff for not, not giving into temptation. I wouldn't expect that, but that would be troubling. And that's why we have to do these audits. And that's a significant issue. So I also appreciated, though, the detailed analyses of our processes and the recommendations. And just want to note that in both instances, finding 1 and finding 2, that the staff response was one of agree and setting forth some specific actions. I just want to call out that with respect to finding 1, policy adherence and training, one of the recommendations was to consider the merits of implementing clearly defined consequences for non-adherence. And in fact, staff has said that ASD will implement a system of consequences for non-compliance, and then talks about escalating consequences, perhaps after a certain number of infractions, et cetera. So I commend you for taking that advice to heart and acting on it. Can you just give us a little sense of timing and when you think you'll have the policy in place and active?
Yeah, so on both finding 1 and finding 2, we've set November 2025 as our target date. We think that's reasonable. We can move on. We've actually already started moving on some of these. So we think that's a reasonable timeframe.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that and taking such timely action. I was going to ask, with respect to the recommendation to consider increasing the limit from 10 to 15,000, if staff had a response on that. But am I hearing, Deputy City Manager, that's better put to another day, or do you have some thoughts on that now?
Yes, and I also looked to Ms. Murdoch, but we have already kicked off another audit that is focused on the purchasing authorities, making sure I'm saying that phrase correctly, which is looking at what the cap amount is that we can approve for contracts and other things. So that's a good opportunity for us if there is interest in considering changing this threshold, that would be sort of a holistic way of seeing what all of the thresholds are at the same time, instead of it being a one-off study or project for us to do. So we can kind of combine those together.
I see. So is the idea that if you can approve a certain level without going through certain things, that then you can pay for it with the credit card limit at a similar level? Is that kind of the idea?
Potentially, yeah. So Mr. Ramberg can speak to that scope as well as Ms. Murdoch. But for example, there's a certain threshold for doing solicitations. There's a certain threshold for when things come to City Council for approval, et cetera. And so really spending some time looking into that is what the upcoming audit is. And so if you're asking questions about what number is high enough or low enough, that's the same sort of space that it seems appropriate to ask it in. Ms. Murdoch, did you want to provide a bit more on that scope, just to make sure I'm capturing it correctly?
So, and I do want to clarify, it's actually an advisory project and not an audit. So as part of the FY26 annual audit plan, this was one of the projects that we brought forth. So we will be looking at, and we have kicked off the project just about 2 weeks ago, but we're looking at contract solicitation thresholds and authority levels. We're doing a benchmarking study as part of this to see what those levels are in other cities. And then we'll be doing some quantitative analysis to kind of see what, are there natural breaking points in Palo Alto that would make sense. We had noted when we did research for this project that the micro threshold level at the federal level is changing in October 2025 from 10,000 to 15,000, which I think is largely a reflection of inflation and things like that. So, but we are going to do a pretty thorough look at this, and part of why this was an additional observation and not a finding with a recommendation was that ASD, it is not necessarily under their purview to change municipal code. So that will need to be a different process to actually make that change.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that if we're talking a 2016 number, and obviously there's inflation, and if it's, that's a number out of Washington, it's not less expensive here than the average across the country. So I do hope we can consider that and give our staff a little more latitude on that at whatever the right number is. Okay, anything else from colleagues? No. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate both our auditors and our staff participating in this audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, do we have to recommend that the council accept the audit? Do we need to do that?
Yes.
Okay,
So moved.
seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Let's vote.
I will say that I'm
there
still somewhat confused on, is cost splitting good or is cost splitting bad? Because our purchase ordering process takes too long and we just want to increase the limit so there's less cost splitting so we save more time and there are less purchase orders? Or is cost splitting bad because it somehow violates policy? And how often does cost splitting happen right now? I think those are basic questions that will help us in the follow-up if we change limits. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the audit itself is fine.
Okay, so the audit itself is fine. Did you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, I think on page 15, which started the conversation about cost splitting, it's really representative of 1 month. So the comment in the audit and what we have here tonight, we don't actually have a figure for overall cost splitting, but I would say that month is a high month that got pulled out here because it actually had 10 transactions. So it's a low instance. And I would also say that if we were to move to, let's say, from 10K to 15K as the limit, which would require a municipal code change, that would, I would say, dramatically decrease instances of cost splitting.
Right.
Because there would be fewer opportunities or fewer requirements for certain purchases to be split up.
Right. So there's nothing wrong with cost splitting right now. It's just that we want to save people more time by making this cost splitting, quote unquote, like approved or legal or just otherwise in the green so they don't have to violate policy to do it.
Right.
So cost splitting is fine. And we want people to do it less, so we'll increase the limit and we'll save people more time overall.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think getting some of that clarity, like when recommendations are made, just like a simple narrative of what is good, what is bad, how often does what happen, would be useful for future presentations.
Got noted. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And thank you, Councilmember Liu. Let's vote.
Chair Binker,
Yes.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
motion carries.
Great. All right, thank you all. We will move on to action item 3. Recommend City Council approval to extend the deadline for 2 FY 2024 audit project task orders and amend 2024 and 25 task order budgets to realign with a net zero impact. City Auditor Murdoch, is that you?
That is me again.
All
Thank
right,
you.
please go ahead.
All right, next slide. So the Office of the City Auditor is seeking to extend the reporting deadline for 2 task orders from June 30th through October 31st, excuse me. The Emergency Preparedness Audit was presented and approved by the committee, the Policy and Services Committee, in April of this year, but it was pulled from the June 16th consent calendar. This audit is now scheduled for the council meeting on October 27th. So just looking to to extend that timeline since work is still ongoing. The dispatch center assessment will be presented to the Policy and Services Committee on September 9th. And then the auditor's office is also seeking to realign the FY24 and 25 task order budgets with a net zero impact overall. The follow-up audit activity task order budget will be reduced by $14,500 in order to add additional funds to the 2 audits just mentioned. These audits were highly complex and required additional meetings and collaboration with management to ensure the information presented was accurate and complete. We were also asked to do additional analysis for the dispatch center audit, which led to more staff time. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. I think I have to ask if there's public comment on this.
We do not have any requests to speak.
Thank you. I just want to ask, in tracking, so I understand that the reason we need to have 425, the emergency preparedness, is because the item was pulled, and we're going to hear that. So is that $1,500 based upon having to continue the work for the October meeting, or is that just generally it was needed to be increased because of the nature of the task?
So we had already actually gone over budget on this task, and we wrote off some of those costs, but when the audit got pulled and I realized it was going to continue to go forward and continue to take some of my time, and since we had budget and the, remaining budget in the follow-up audit activity, I elected to come and see if we could, kind of correct that or realign the budget so that we could get that time paid for.
Yeah, no, I understand. If we're asking for more work, we should pay for it. I just wanted to clarify that that was in fact the case. I don't have any questions, colleagues. Councilmember Liu.
So just to confirm, are we actually making any changes to the wildfire audit, or is it really just the 1,500 is for the several hours you'll need to present to the full council and discuss? Okay, cool. So there's not like active work that we actually need to follow up on. Okay, got it. And what is follow-up audit activities?
So follow-up audit activities are essentially, we look at all of the previous audits that we've done, and we periodically follow up to see what the status of recommendations is. So are they in progress? Sometimes a recommendation may become obsolete for whatever reason. So we really come in and we kind of check in on the status of where, how those things are being implemented and give an update to council on it.
Okay, so we won't get an update at the end of the year then about the overall status of all the
You
recommendations.
will still get an update.
Oh, okay. So follow-up audit activities was kind of like a buffer budget that we could use as needed, I guess, or are we not following up on something?
No, I would say, we have not completed that work. I don't anticipate going over the budget. I think we probably overestimated what we needed to do that activity. I am still relatively new, so I'm definitely learning the ropes as I go, and still trying to right size some of the task orders that we have. So hoping that as I move forward in this process, I get a better and better understanding of how long things are going to take. I think one thing that I underestimated with the dispatch center assessment, for example, was just when you're dealing with 2 different departments, that dual communication took a lot more time and a lot more negotiating than I previously experienced. So, yeah.
Got it. I think all the line items make sense to me, and this sounds good. And should I move the staff recommendation?
Sure.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And I'll just make the comment before we vote, Ms. Murdoch, that I have had to, over the course of my career, create quite a number of professional services budgets. And it is really hard to estimate people's time in changing circumstances. So I've been there and I get it. And I have no further comments. So with that, let's vote.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Lou,
Yes.
motion carries.
Great. Okay, we are on to our last action item, and that is Wellness and Belonging Update Report to, and welcome our Wellness and Belonging Program Manager, Mr. Pierce. But I guess, should I start with Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines?
Yes, we'll actually be tag teaming this one. So
Excellent.
good evening, Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager, and joined by Mr. Kojo Pierce, our Wellness and Belonging Program Manager, as the chair stated. Good evening. This evening, we'll be giving you an overview of activities almost for the last year, actually. Our last update to this committee was August 2024. We have been doing work since then, and we wanted to provide the committee with an update on just where things are and what's coming forward. As you know, we've got the Equity Action Plan, and that's sort of guiding a lot of our steps of what we're doing. There's a lot happening nationally in this discussion space, and we just really want to provide updates on where we are and what we're doing locally. So with that, I will give it over to Mr. Pierce to cover the first few slides. Next slide, please.
Oh, I thought I was supposed to say next slide. I'm so sorry. Hey, everyone. How you doing? Kojo Pierce, Wellness and Belonging Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our recommendations. Thank you. Staff recommends that the Policy and Services Committee accept this update on the city's recent wellness and belonging work, as well as an update regarding our CEDAW ordinance. So now, next slide, please. Now we're just going to go back a little bit and give you all some background of our equity efforts. So the city began its equity efforts in 2020. In November of that year, the City Council adopted a list of assignments that have been tracked through our quarterly reports to the committee since 2021. Our most recent report was in August 2024. The city also launched an action plan with specific projects based on our findings from our Ivy assessment, which was done in 2024 as well. In 2025, City Council adopted 4 priorities, including public safety, wellness, and belonging. Our future updates will reference wellness and belonging to align with these priorities. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into our status updates. Attachment A in the document contains our Wellness and Belonging Action Plan updates as a reference. So please use that. We've highlighted a few action items and some upcoming events related to our ongoing city programming as well. So some of the action items we want to highlight include the following. So that's action item 1.3, action item 2.1, 2.2, 2.5, action item 3.4, and also 3.8. Now we're going to pass it to Chantel. Next slide, please.
And as Mr. Pierce referenced, the attachment A has information on a lot of these. We just selected a few of them to highlight for the committee this evening. So if there are questions on other items that we're not highlighting, please by all means ask those. Just a few updates on the items Mr. Pierce referenced. Action item 1.3 is one of our projects we counted as completed related to the council calendar. As you recall, this past year, we went to the Human Relations Commission and worked with them based off generating a list of holidays and working with the Human Relations Commission to offer dates for the city council to avoid when setting your annual calendar. And so that was a nice collaboration with the Human Relations Commission being able to advise the council with suggestions on things that impact your very busy annual meeting schedule. And we'll replicate that process again this year, making tweaks, of course, based off what we learned last year. Action plan item 2.1 is wellness and belonging values for new employees. We were actually able to do this one as a special project, which means we were able to ask city employees that are not normally assigned this work to help us pull together a sort of a presentation, small video that we can share during our new employee orientation. Just to share some of our values around wellness and belonging and being an open and inclusive working environment in context of all the other information that here is new employees. So we have a draft of that and we're just finalizing it and should be able to launch that for new employees starting this fall. Action plan item 2.2 quarterly interactive training for staff. This is a very broad item. Our intention here is to make sure that we're increasing the amount of trainings that are really focused on inclusivity and belonging here at the city. So we've done a variety of subject matters to this date. I believe we've done one every other month on an ongoing basis this year, trying different topics. And next year, we're looking to hone in on a few of those topics and try to increase the number of city employees that are able to attend those different training sessions. As you know, we have a very large workforce. We did not cover our entire workforce with the topics thus far this year, but we want to really focus on having a set amount of trainings, set topics, and then working with our department directors and different department leads to encourage staff to attend those trainings. Next slide, please. The action item 2.5 is the city demographics reporting. We have worked on this one for a very long time. This is actually one of the items that came from the city council list of assignments for us in 2020 to be able to pull our workforce demographic data. The process that we went through between then and the time of publishing was making sure that we refresh the demographic information for our employees, make sure that we have some form of consent from our city employees that we can report on that data in the aggregate. And we were able to release the first report of that at the end of last year. And we're working on the next year of data. We are doing a snapshot in time is how we describe the data we collect. Every October, we're just pulling the data of employees that we have at that time. We make sure that we go through the process of ensuring that it's not, that you cannot go through that data and identify any particular employee. That's not the purpose of us sharing that information. It's really for us to be able to report on it in a more aggregated way. And we are trying to make a more interactive dashboard for the next round of data that we will release. The first one is a static PDF, but it is available on the HR website here at the city. So it's very important information for current employees to know, as well as any member of the community, as well as prospective employees. Action item plan 3.4 is about the CDAW ordinance. I'll actually hit on that just briefly on the next slide. So I'll skip that one in this moment. And then action plan item 3.8, begin analysis and begin summary of the RIPA data. This is another assignment, and RIPA stands for, it's at the very bottom, the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. This is stop data for our police department. This was another one of those assignments that came from the city council in 2020, and this was separated out as two different assignments. The first part of that was making sure that we can release our RIPA data annually online, and the police department has been doing that since about 2023, I believe. I might be off by 1 year. And there's an interactive dashboard, and they have released last year's data, and that's also uploaded onto the dashboard. And they make small tweaks to that interface year over year as we learn new things. The second piece of this assignment is the one that we are very close to completion on, which is analyzing some of that data. There are a lot of different ways you can think about this data, and we really wanted to work with a professional that spends a lot of time on this type of policing data so that we can have a more robust way of understanding how we can utilize this new vast amount of data that we did not previously have. So we have worked with the National Policing Institute, and they're analyzing our 2023 and 2024 RIPA data. And that data typically comes out around every April, just so you know, in terms of the cadence. And there's a report that we plan to bring to the city council when it's finalized this year. Because we're working with the National Policing Institute through a federal agency, they had some changes in process that they had to do this year. And so that is what we are currently navigating. We will still be able to publicly share the report that we receive from the National Policing Institute, but because the federal government is the funding agency for it, there are now stipulations around exactly how we do that. Nonetheless, National Policing Institute has done really great work, and we're excited to be able to share that report to the city council and the community. Next slide, please. The last update that we will quickly go through is action plan item 3.4, which is related to the CDAW. And CDAW stands for the Convention to End Discrimination all forms of discrimination against women. It's in the staff report in case I accidentally forgot one of the letters. So we, as staff, have worked with our city attorney's office in drafting a ordinance that we can bring to this committee for review. The draft includes information on Palo Alto's principles on this topic, including the city's commitment to support policies and programs that understand the unique needs of women in areas such as economic development, housing and homelessness, and community library and transportation as some of the areas. Our intention is to bring that draft to this committee for review, hopefully within Q3, so sometime in the next month or so, and then to subsequently take that to the city council for full adoption. Next slide, please. And lastly is our update on religious tolerance training. And I put in parenthetical there. That was not an item that was in our action plan. That came up through the HRC's work that they presented to the city council based off their listening sessions that they conducted with our Jewish communities as well as our Islamic and Arab communities here in Palo Alto. And the council's recommendation to staff was to go forward with trying to find a training provider that we could use to provide a training to staff, board and commission members, as well as the city council. So we worked with the current chair as well as the previous chair of the Human Relations Commission to narrow down trainers that seem to be a good fit for this discussion in our community. And thank you to community members and some council members for providing suggestions of possible trainers. And on July 10th, we went to the HRC and discussed the proposed trainers, which is a group called Islamic Network Group, or ING, as well as Project Shema. And the training scope we shared at that meeting as well and received some additional feedback from the community, and mostly positive. So the feedback that we received at the HRC meeting was that it's really nice that there's two organizations which are representing different perspectives on these very important topics in our community. And that should provide a more balanced perspective and dialogue opportunity for the staff and board and commission members and city council members who are attending the training. So as a next step from that meeting, staff is working on the contracts with both of those groups, and we are anticipating having that training in October. As you can imagine, we'll probably have 2 of those trainings with the intention of having board and commission members as well as city council members present. We do have to keep in mind quorums and making sure that it's an open space that folks can talk and learn and feel comfortable as a safe space, and that it's not a public meeting. And I think the next slide is just our contact information. And so we'll take any questions from there. And if there are other action plan items that you'd like to zoom in on, we can provide those updates. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of activity. So thank you so much for summarizing that and bringing it forward today. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Our first request to speak is Ken H.
Welcome, Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you. Welcome back to
Thank
meetings.
you.
I'm Ken Horowitz, and I'm a health professional. And I want to talk a little bit about mental illness tonight, and particularly among our youth. And it's not in this this report, but I know a number of items have been brought up about mental health. And I happen to think it's a metabolic disease, which means a lot of it's based on foods that our kids are eating. And so I want to support the efforts of the schools and city liaison committee to continue their work with the JED Foundation. Unfortunately, the city school meetings have been very infrequent due to getting the individuals together at a certain time. But now we're back, schools start this week, and I'm hopeful that the next few meetings, the school liaison committee meets once a month, and hopefully they can begin to talk about mental illness among our youth. recent report indicates that there's still about 10% of its students that have thought about suicide, and we don't need any more suicides in Palo Alto. So I'm just here to support the city's efforts on mental health and to do whatever it can to avoid another tragedy in our city. Thank you very much. And
Thank you for your public comment. Does that conclude or any others?
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll bring it back to the dais. Comments? Mr. Stone. Mr. Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Chair. Well, appreciate all the work that staff has been doing on this. This is such a important and I think challenging host of policies to be navigating. I know some of it's been taking a little longer than we or the community might want to have happen, but I think the progress generally is really good. Appreciate the time frame. I think one of my frustrations has been how long it has taken for the religious tolerance trainings to happen. Again, very complicated issue to navigate. So I understand and I appreciate the real desire to work with all members of the community to be able to identify good trainers. So I'm excited to learn more about that and happy to hear that the actual, I just want clarification, the actual trainings are expected to happen in October. So this contract should be done sometime next month.
Yes, we're working on the contract now. It's a small contract, so we're hoping for our previous conversations that it will move along relatively quickly. It's about $10,000 for each trainer, and that's for 2 trainings for each trainer, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So we are hopeful. We're setting the date and moving towards being able to do the trainings in October, taking into account many dates to avoid, obviously in September and October with high holy days with multiple groups. And so we think that we've settled on at least 1 or 2 date options.
And have there been talks to, if these are successful with these trainers, to be able to expand these training opportunities for any members of the public who want to participate?
We have not gone that far yet, but hoping that these will be successful. I think that that could be a discussion. It's just sort of a budget question at that point, and also just making it clear of how we want to organize those.
Yeah, and I think this is a good first step and could be a bit of a pilot to see how successful this is, and we can discuss it at mid-year budget or next budget, and maybe something for the HRC to revisit after October, after kind of seeing how this goes.
Absolutely. They had an interest in making it mandatory. We shared some of the complications with it being mandatory of the amount of city employees plus board and commission members plus city council members, and that is not possible over a 2 training series, but it is definitely good for us to do this as a pilot and encourage as many people as possible to attend. And I think the city council's help in that regard will be very awesome, and encouraging the board and commission members to attend as well. The better attended these are, I think the better we're able to assess sort of how it worked and how we're feeling about it.
Agreed, and I hope in the scheduling of those trainings as well, take into account board and commission and council members who work during the day. So hopefully differing hours. Really glad to see the CDOT ordinance finally coming. That's been a very long time. So eager to see that come back. And then only other question. So where does mental health and our efforts there kind of fit within this plan, or from staff's perspective, does that kind of fit within another action plan? Or because I know this work is being done. We've made a lot of great gains there in the last couple of years, and we're continuing to do that work, but not seeing it in this action plan, unless I missed it.
No, you did not miss it. We previously called a lot of the work here the race and equity or equity and inclusion updates. We wanted to retitle that to align it with the council priorities. And so that was more of the wellness and belonging work, and realizing that that also complicates it because that's a broader topic than just our equity action plan. And so I think those updates on the, we can discuss if it makes sense to include some of those here, but most of the updates on the mental health, I think, are with the council priority objectives, more broadly speaking, any of them related to mental health or wellness broadly.
Okay, yeah, just want to make that clear that we're not forgetting those critical pieces and it's in someplace else. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Litt.
Thank you so much for this work. The CDAW work is great. I'm hopeful that we can get that done, but that we can also do some brainstorming in our policy and services, subsequent policy and services meeting on how we actually add some action or think about other policies to go alongside that in the future. I know the religious tolerance training is so difficult. Council, we've gotten a lot of public comment. It's tough. I realize it must be tough on staff. I'm really glad that we've gotten mostly positive feedback so far, and I'm really happy that that is moving ahead. I guess I only had one question. There was a item in the action plan to analyze the employee survey data by different cohorts, and I realized that was completed. I'm not sure if there's any link or any ability for us to learn more about the employee survey or any results from that. But my main question is, do we cover wellness and belonging type questions explicitly in the survey questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The employee survey, excuse me, we can share a link with the committee of the responses for the last 2 years of the employee survey.
Yeah.
This is something that's new. So I think 2023 was the first time we did it, and then in 2024. And so there's a link that I can share with the committee, and there is a series of questions within the survey that is focused on sort of inclusion and belonging efforts.
Great. I think it'd be a really valuable thing to track going forward as we set council priorities around this, to just see, at least for city staff, that number go up over time. Yeah, I've seen this kind of tracking or sort of metric accountability work well in other contexts, in other places I've worked for wellness and belonging type initiatives. So that might be something we consider in future iterations of the action plan.
Absolutely. And selfishly sharing the data that it was higher in 2024 than it was in 2023. So I think that's reflective of some of the trainings and just the opportunities for staff to engage in this space. Our program is not a huge program if you think about other cities and their sort of equity teams, but it is positive to know that our staff is really receiving it and really happy to engage on the topic.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing this work. I'm really glad Mr. Pierce is here working on this, and really glad that despite our lean team that you're, accomplishing so much and so committed to this work. It really is important and to enhance our city and our city's business. I wanted to ask a little bit about the back on item 2.2, the quarterly interactive training for staff that you're actually doing bi-monthly. So that's great. So is it done sort of by department, or how do you just, because we do have such a huge staff, how do you sort out who is invited when?
Yeah, so we're collaborating with HR. So we draft up an email and we send it to all employees. So it's open to everyone. I actually have some numbers. This is great. I have some numbers for staff who registered, but I actually don't have the numbers as far as like who attended. So if you want me to share that with you, I'll be more than happy to.
Sure, I'd love to know like roughly what the turnout is.
Yeah, absolutely. So far we've had 8 trainings. So for conscious conversations, we had 50 people sign up. Gender Uncovered, we had 118 people sign up. For restorative conversations, we had 47 people sign up. Unraveling Equity, we had 44. Stretch and Grow, we had 37. Relationship and Inclusion Strategies for Leaders, we had 26. Diversity Uncovered, we had 84. And Cultural Competency, we had 55.
Wow, great. And have you played a little bit with like time of day, or are they at one time?
Yeah, so we have options for both, I think 9 to 12, and the second ones are usually 1 to 3. So we have different options.
That's great.
And they're also shorter too. I'm sorry about that. So at first they were 3 hours, but now they're 2 hours. So
Got
we're
it.
even thinking about maybe making them 90 minutes because, staff is really busy. And I think a 3 hour block is
Tough.
quite a lot. So, yeah.
So if I had gone to the first one, am I eligible to go to more that year? Or do I have to kind of wait till other folks have had space, or how does that
You
how
can
does
go
that
to
work?
all of them. if
Go to
you
all of
like.
them, okay.
Yes.
Then do we know, one of the things that might be interesting in looking at it to see if there's the same like core of 12 people that go to all of them and then just a few others. I'm seeing a nod.
Yes, and you're hitting at why we really want to formalize this a little bit more with HR. It's sort of every year that these trainings will be offered so that we can expand the number of staff that can attend specific training topics. I think
Yes.
we have been able to tap into staff that are really enthusiastic about this, which is great. We want to tap into as many staff as possible. And so with that, I think some level of, I know next year these 4 trainings will be offered. So let me try to map out my training schedule or work with my supervisor on my work plan. So I know that I can go to 2 of those 4 trainings and sort of map it as an individual staff person. So I think that will make a huge difference. This year has been really good for us trying different topics and also just making it available. So I think we'll be able to hopefully increase those numbers of different types of staff attending each training.
That's terrific. I mean, we love the enthusiastic staff, but they perhaps need it less than some of the less enthusiastic. So that is great. Okay. Yeah, and I'm excited, your report about the RIPA data and analyses going on right now, and that you found a good partner with NPI. I'm really looking forward to hearing that report when it's ready. So thank you for that work as well. I think, Palo Alto prides itself on our oversight of our police. We are pleased with our force, but we're also pleased with our oversight. And I think that just knowing and understanding more about what's happening will help us do that and help the force do that. Yes, and I'm obviously very excited about the CDA ordinance. One can't legislate equity or equality, but one can start by efforts like this and then build on them with the programs and action plans that Councilmember Liu was referencing. So thank you and to the Attorney's Office for working on that as well. And yes, I too am very glad to see the religious tolerance training progressing. And it's funny because I was going to ask, because it wasn't, having not been involved in those conversations, I couldn't tell from the staff report or the slides for whom these were, like who are we training? And I take it that it's open to staff, council member and boards and commissions. And then the thought is if we can figure it out with dollars and such, perhaps open it to the community in the future. Is that?
Yes, so the council direction on this after the HRC discussion was to offer to staff and the boards and commission members, and we expanded that to also include our city council.
Thank you.
Point of personal privilege we just took. But yes, the idea is to really encourage the city organization to deepen our understanding around this is what we understood the assignment to be. And so that is the
Right.
first steps that we're taking.
Great, great. Thank you very much. And finally, I just wanted to note, I think it was on page 52 I have in my notes. Now I'm not going to be able to find it. Bear with me. I want to share this. 77. Yeah, that with respect to mental health, in the staff report, there was other updates relevant to this work and reporting the good news of the federal grant related to mental health, the $2 million grant. This is back in September 2022 to support trust, but just reporting on the use of that for the mental health first aid that we are familiar with. And the pilot program running from July 23 to August 24, and the report that we got in 2025. So now I do agree with the others, the public commenter and my colleagues, that we have to figure out how to take that forward and really embed that in our work generally, but in this work also specifically. So thank you for including that, but hopefully we can be helpful to you in figuring out how to go forward with that work. Any other comments? Now, this is an action item. So what is the action that we?
It's an action item because there is no information item at committee. And so we
Ah.
just wanted to be able to discuss this with you, but we do not have a particular action we need from the committee this evening. As I referenced, we'll bring the CDOT ordinance within the coming months, and that will be an action item for you to forward to the city council.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I kind of want to move the continued support of this.
We can forward this whole report if you'd like to the council, but there's no action for the council there. Maybe we can do it as an informational item for full council.
Okay. I would like to share this with full council. I think we get a broader community audience there. And I think it's important for people to know this work is ongoing and the breadth of it and the progress that has been made in terms of the trainings and programs being offered. That's my personal view. All right, anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you so much, both for the work and for the presentation tonight. I think that concludes action item 4. And we have, and so moving on to future meetings and agendas, we have a second meeting this month. And I don't know, Deputy City Manager, would you like to speak to that?
I do, and thank you, Mr. Pierce, and thank you for those
Yes.
updates and for all the other staff who helps us with the equity and wellness and belonging work. A much heavier topic for your second meeting in August. There's a special meeting on August 25th, and the only agenda item that evening is discussing impacts related to oversized vehicles. And so staff is working on that report, and it will print this Thursday. And I anticipate that will be a pretty big discussion for the committee.
Agreed. And thank you. I know a lot of thought and preparation has gone into it on staff's part. So I look forward to being able to discuss this openly with our community and think through it with staff. It's a complex issue, but one highly deserving of our time and attention. So appreciate you doing that and my colleagues for coming to a second meeting this month. So thank you so much. Thank you to our clerk and city attorney for being here tonight. And I think we are done and adjourned.